Welcome back everybody to another C# EGG202 video. In this one we're going to go over developing desktop applications with using C#.NET. So it's going to be basically a graphical user interface, or GUI for short. So GUI development we're going to be doing with C#. So once again, we open up Visual Studio 2022 or 2019, either one of these will work. I'm going to select Create New Project as always. And as it's loading, let's go ahead and I will search for C#. So let's say it's currently searching. So we don't want to use console app this time. We want to go ahead and select Windows Forms app. And we want to actually use .NET framework. So we want to select this one, Windows Forms app, .NET framework. I'm going to select this, hit next, and I guess a project name, I guess we can go with this, Windows Forms app 1, but I guess I'm going to go ahead and call it temperature converter, since that's what I'm going to be doing in this program. So let's just call it temp converter. And once again, we want to maybe select our location. We want to save our files. So I'm going to go ahead and go to browse. And I'm going to go to my OneDrive desktop, so where my last files are saved right here. So we have EGG202 video project. So I'm going to click on this and then select folder. So it's going to create a project folder in this directory along with other ones. So right here if I click on my folder from last time, we have our first project. It'll create a separate folder in this directory, which will be our temperature converter program. So I'm going to choose, I guess, .NET Framework 4.72. So I guess the newest one, just go with the newest one you have on whatever editor you're using. Let's hit create. And it will go ahead and sort of create our project. And here we are. So it's still loading. But anyway, this is going to be our desktop application. This is going to be our canvas where you can go ahead and drag and drop various objects. So if you go to our toolbox over here, and since I installed this recently, it's going to have to load up some more. And we have all Windows forms, but we want to go to common controls just because. And here's going to be all of our different objects we can go ahead and add to this canvas. So you want to go to, you can select all Windows forms, so it has every possible object we can add to this, but we're not going to need to use every one of these for this simple EGG202 lab. So typically common controls is going to be where we're going to be selecting our objects. So we're going to have buttons, combo box, check boxes, labels will be used, picture box might be used later on as well, text box. So we're going to be using very basic applications, or basic sort of objects to add to applications for our labs. So let's go ahead. I'm just gonna put this back. Let's go ahead now and begin developing our first GUI app using C#.NET. Okay, so now we can go back to our toolbox. So it's always going to be here on the left side of our editor. Now let's say if you accidentally were to close this down, if you go to View, you can see right here there is going to be a toolbox option right there, which will sort of pull it up right there like that. So I would just say never close this, but if you were to ever accidentally close it, you can always, plug it back through the View tab. Now, of course, it does take a little bit of practice with Visual Studio to actually sort of work with this, but typically you can just sort of on Google search for how you would actually add stuff back in. It's usually just have to kind of mess with this until you finally get it. So there's no real science behind that. So I guess just to go back, here's our canvas, and of course here's our properties window, which this is going to allow us to sort of add sort of features to our objects as we add them in. Now right now we have our form 1. So right there's our form 1. I'm going to go ahead and give it a better name. I want to have this right there named maybe temp converter as well. So if you scroll to on this side right there, we see our text field. I'm going to rename this to temp converter. Like this. And we can see that now it displays it right there on our window. Now for the form, it's good practice is to always give your forms a proper name. So Let's look at the name field for this. So again, it takes a little bit of time to sort of just get used to this. So let's see, it should be a name field somewhere, which is, this is, of course, there we go, name. So we can have generic form one. I'm going to go ahead and just call it maybe just FRM form, and then just temp converter. This is actually not going to change anything on the actual form view, but basically we want to give our form a proper name as well, just because it's always good to give any of our variables, objects a proper name. We also can, we can increase the size of our form by dragging it around like this. Now, with these WinForms, sort of using this Windows form environment, it's not going to be a scalable UI design. So if you want to have a scalable app, you want to use WPF, but that involves using, I think it's XAML, XAML, which is sort of a markup language similar to HTML to design the view. But in these labs, you don't have a lot of time to learn about WPF. So we're going to stick to this very simple drag and drop canvas approach to this. So in this program, we're going to want to, of course, sort of add a few objects into this. I'm going to go ahead and go to our toolbox. And the first thing we're going to have is possibly a label. So I'm going to put a label, drag it, and then sort of drop it somewhere in the canvas. So there's my label. And you can see here, if I click on the form, then this is going to be the properties for my form. But now if I click on my label, you can see now we're adding sort of properties to the label. So once again, it's always good to give a label a proper name, but in this program, we're not going to really have our program dynamically modify this label. So I'll keep it as just label 1 as a name for right now. So of course it has a name field as well for this. And I wish I had these sorted, so it's easier to find it, but it's not sorted, of course. So there's actually a text field. I'm going to go ahead and just have it say enter, I guess, degrees in Celsius. Hope I spelled it correctly. Yes. So it's going to display that right here on my form. And of course I can give this this label, I can give a label a different name instead. Now I'm trying to see, where's that name field? So why is this always so hard to find these, especially being recorded? You definitely just cannot find where these are. Maybe you already saw it, I just sort of skipped past it. So I have to find this. I'm going to go ahead and find this. So let's see. Name, where is name? There it is. So we can give this label a proper name, but I'm not going to right now because really we're not going to do anything. I'm not going to have our program modify this label, so we'll keep it like this. Okay, so let's go to our toolbox, and I want to select sort of a way to read inputs. So text box is going to be what we're going to use. I'm going to click and drag our text box. And notice how we can align it properly with our other labels. So I'm going to go ahead and put it here for right now. I'll move it a little bit more like this. And this is going to be our text box. So I guess for now I'm going to actually make our label, our form a little smaller because it looks really awkward, sort of big like that. But we can align our elements nicely. Oh, darn, that's not what I wanted to do. I'm just go ahead and go back. I'm going to close it and go back to my program. So I'm sorry about that. I made a mistake with that, but I don't want to redo the video. So I'm just going to go ahead and just save it like this. But anyway, we can drag and we can sort of align it properly. So just to kind of, you want to always do this to make your sort of program look nice or have your UI look nice like that. So this is going to allow us to sort of have the user enter some input right there. Okay, so another feature we want to, another sort of object we want to add to this form is going to be a button, where you want to click on a button that will activate some type of task. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Toolbox and look for a button. There's our button right there. I'm going to click and drag it and sort of drop it right here. I'll make this align with this. I'm going to go ahead and sort of drag this as well and align that with this as well, so it looks a bit nicer. It's nicely aligned with everything else in our form so far. So we have our button 1. Now I want to give this button a proper name because it's going to be used to convert temperatures. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the button. So just click on this button so you see how this is highlighting around. I'm going to go to my properties window. And I want to give this text, maybe I'm going to say, I'm going to call it convert for the text. As you can see, it updates it to convert right there. And then for the name, definitely I want to give this a proper name because, well, it's definitely going to be doing some type of work for us. We're going to be using this button in our actual program. So again, let's go ahead and find that name, which is of course going to be a pain to look. There it is, name right there. I'm going to call this BTN convert, which is short for button convert. So it's going to be a button object. So in our program, giving these names, these labels like BTN is short for button. So we know that this is a button object when we're actually going to be coding this. And also, I sort of skipped ahead a little too far. I want to click on this text box, and I want to give this a better name. I want to call this maybe TXT degree. So in my program, I can identify this easily because TXT is going to be short for a text box and then degrees. So I know I'm going to be pulling a degree value from this text box into my program. So giving them proper names makes it very easy to write the code when you have to actually work with these objects in your actual code. So now I'm going to add one more object. I'm going to add a label. This label is going to be used to output or display the output when we convert from Celsius to Fahrenheit. So I'm going to go ahead and just find a label. There it is. I'm going to click on label, drag it, and sort of drop it right there. And I guess I think I'll leave it like this for right now. And I'm going to go ahead and keep that text there because I want to be able to see that label. But I want to give it a proper name. I'm going to say LBL, maybe I'll call it sort of output. I guess it's a good name. So that way I know how to refer to my output label in my program. It's called LBL output. So this is going to be just our UI design. We added this text box. We added this label, which tells the user to enter degrees in Celsius right there, a convert button, and then we have our label too. I might add some more content to this, but for now let's go ahead and sort of keep it like this. So this is going to be our UI. Next we're going to begin writing code that will allow us to pull input, do some calculations, and output the answers right here to this label too. Okay, so now that we have our form design, let's go ahead and look at the code for this. So if you look at the form and you right click on it, and then we can click on view code, this will be the actual code for our program. Now right now, there's not much really going on right here. We can see here that we're doing the following class we're creating called form temp converter, and we're going to inherit this from the form class. So here's where inheritance does play a role in natural programming. So form is some type of superclass, and we're going to inherit all the properties from that to our form so we can go ahead and override functions and customize our form. So right now there's nothing really going on here. So let's go ahead and add some events to this program. So for the most part, for individuals with these WinForms applications, it's going to be event driven. So event driven is a relatively used method of programming. So for mobile development, web apps, you always have some event where an event happens, you have to have it run some program. So for us, we're not going to do too many complicated events, but for right now, we want to write an event where if this convert button is clicked, we want our program to do something. So in order to add the event, I'm going to take this in my form and just double click on this convert button. And you see here it just created this function, btn convert underscore click. That means when our event is triggered, when our button is clicked, it's going to call this function. So this is going to be a non-static function because the idea is that when we go ahead and build this application, it's going to create an object of type form temp converter somewhere. And you have to have these instance or these member functions have to be used to be able to run our events. We can't use static in this case. So, okay, cool. So we have that. Now, of course, let's go ahead and look at our form again. So we go to this convert. I click on convert and I go over here for a second. We see here's all the actual properties of our button. If I click over here on this arrow symbol or thunderbolt or the LA Charger symbol, whatever you want to call it, we can go ahead and we see all of our sort of our events, I guess you can say. So our click event happens. It's going to trigger this btn convert underscore click function. There's also all kinds of other events you have in this program as well, all events you have, but we're not going to do too many events. So the click is going to be the most common event we're going to be using with a button. But of course you can create your own custom function, add it right there as well, but it's typically much simpler. Just double click on this to have this editor just automatically create the event for us like this. So then go ahead and click back on properties once again. So let's go ahead and right click back to the code. Okay, so I want to go ahead and write a program that's going to read an input from the user and then simply compute sort of the amount in Fahrenheit. So I'm going to create a variable right here, a local variable in this function, double Celsius, like this. Now we have to pull the input from the user, but the issue is that, well, it's not command line based, so we can't just use console read line. However, we got to read the input from this text box right there, and we gave it a proper name. We called it txt degree, so it'll be easy to refer to this in our program. So I'm going to go back to my code and just say Celsius. Wow, it's actually really nice how this works, but with this whole machine learning type stuff going on here. So we have this convert dot to double. We could also do double dot convert. Either one is actually a proper way of doing this, but we actually have to, it was a little bit wrong slightly. It's going to be txt degree dot text. There we go. So we have this txt dot degree dot text. This is going to be the actual whatever text is sort of assigned, what's given over there. And then we're going to do a convert to take this amount and convert it and pass it into our Celsius. So really it's the same thing almost as we had console.readline, except now txt degree dot text is going to be the actual text written over here. And we're going to pull that in over here and convert it into a double and store it into our variable Celsius. Okay, so far so good. Now I want to go ahead and I want to take this amount of Celsius and convert it into Fahrenheit. So the conversion is going to be the following. So we're going to take, I'm going to create another variable I'm going to put over here, I guess. I'm going to say double, I think it's Fahrenheit is the way it's spelled, I believe. Hope I got that correctly. I think that's how it's spelled. So we're going to take our Fahrenheit amount equals, I wonder if actually this machine learning can determine that I'm trying to do a conversion. Okay, I guess it can't. So I'm going to take my Celsius amount and then multiply it by 9.0 divided by 5.0 plus 32. That's our standard conversion from Celsius to Fahrenheit. So okay, now we have it converted. We want to go ahead and write the output somewhere in our program. So I want to go ahead and output this right here in the label 2, I call it, but I think I actually have it. That's what the text. I think the label is actually called LBL output. Okay, cool. So I'm going to go back to my code, and I'm going to say LBL output. In fact, it actually already knows that's my label. So again, giving a proper name helps identify everything in your program. Dot text equals. So I'm going to go ahead and I want to output Fahrenheit. So I'm going to put in Fahrenheit over here, but LBL output of text has to be a string. So this .to string will be used right here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit tab to accept that. So I want to convert it into a string like this. And then I'm going to just, I guess, leave it like this for right now. So I'm going to go ahead and maybe do more to the output in a second, but let's go ahead and just keep it simple like this for right now. I'm going to go ahead and save this. And let's go ahead and run this application. So I'm going to go ahead, you can hit Control F5, or I'm going to hit this start button up top to build the application. Let's see how it looks. So now it's going to be running the application at the moment. Awesome. And I'm going to go ahead and type in some amounts. So I think in Celsius, I think that 100 Celsius is going to give us 212 Fahrenheit. I'm going to go ahead and hit convert. And it outputs 212 right there. So it does work. It took 100, pulled it into right here. So txt degree.text, pulled in 100 as a string. I passed that into this convert function, which assigned 100 into Celsius double, did a conversion, and it outputs the amount. If I go ahead and if I type in 0, hit convert, then it's 32. So it looks like, I mean, that's all you have to know really about Celsius and Fahrenheit. So 100 Celsius is 212 Fahrenheit, 0 Celsius is 32 Fahrenheit. If you know that, you are definitely good to go with this. Okay, so I want to go ahead and just sort of mention a few things here. So for one, if I go ahead and I rebuild this, just to rerun this again, it gives us this awful label 2 right there, which is really not really aesthetically pleasing to have that. Now, of course, I could sort of take my text and then clear it out, like right over here in my program. or in my sort of my properties window. The problem with that, if I do that though, then this actually disappears off my canvas, and it becomes a real pain to actually be able to find. Let's say I want to go ahead and I want to click and I want to move it somewhere else potentially. It becomes impossible to find it once the text is cleared out. So we're going to go ahead and do a few more updates to this to really be able to have a nicer program to do a couple of extra tests. Also verify if we have an invalid number, how do we actually make it not really do any work, and so forth. Let's go ahead and get started on that. Alright, so the next thing is, if I want to go ahead and I can double click on the actual form, and let's see what happens. Let's double click on this. And this creates the following event. So this is really when the form loads, this function is going to run automatically. I guess you can think of it almost like a GUI version of a constructor. It's going to automatically call this function when this event is sort of triggered. So, okay, so what I'm going to do right now, when the event is triggered, I want to go ahead and say something like LBL output dot text. I'm going to set equal to blank. So right now in the form, it shows the label to right there. When we load this form, it will call this function automatically, which is going to just do one thing, clear out the output. Let's see if it does it correctly. Let's click on the start button. And there we are. It's actually cleared out. So this is actually a better way of doing this. Instead of actually, even for this button right here, even for this text right there, it would be better to actually display this text inside the form load instead. But I guess for this prompt message right there, it was sort of okay to have it like that. All right, so, okay, so far we have that part set up. So now what I want to do is the following. So I'm going to go ahead and modify my convert function slightly, where it's not going to actually even do any work at all if, let's say, we have invalid number right there. So let's go back to our form 1, and I'm going to go to my btn convert click. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say the following. So remember from our from our earlier videos, we had this try convert. So I'm going to now just do the following. So if, I think I'm going to go ahead and say, I'm going to modify it, say double dot try parse. So I'll do a little different here, try parse. And I'm going to pass in txt, I guess this is actually what I wanted to do. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to put some brackets over there. And I'm going to clear this out. And I'll put this content up here. Like that. So remember what this does, we're going to call this try parse. We're going to pass in this degree.text. And if it's actually parsable into a double, it will assign it to Celsius, and then we'll run this code. Else, I'm going to put an else case over here. So again, using else and if and else is not always preferred. It's better to return actually instead. But I'll go ahead and I'll put an else here just to keep it simple. So if it's not convertible, I'm going to go ahead and put some label and just say txt LBL output dot text equals I'm going to go ahead and just say something like invalid input. I'm going to give it so that way tells the user that there was something invalid right there. So just same idea. So really so far it's not much different from programming in command line, except we have different ways of displaying output and reading in input. A little different, but it's sort of logically not so much different. Okay, let's go ahead and now try to test this out and see what it gives us. So I'm going to go ahead and type, let's say just 52.5 Celsius. I'm going to hit convert, and it gives us the equivalent in Fahrenheit. So what happens is, every time I type in something different, 56.7, hit convert, it's going to give us a new amount. Okay, so it looks like it's working. Let's go ahead and just sort of put in, let's say, hello. It outputs invalid input. If we go ahead and say maybe like 3, 4 R, which is not proper, again invalid input. If I go ahead and enter a proper value, let's say I try something like -5.3, it converts it into a right amount. So we're able to do a little bit of input verification right there. But we're going to go ahead now and just do some more events and sort of work on how to make this a bit more sophisticated. Because for one, I mean, I want this label to be cleared out when I enter some invalid input, and also maybe gray out this convert button if, let's say, the user enters invalid number. I don't want it to be even clickable at all. Let's go ahead and sort of work on that part next. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to have an actual event we're going to create. Now, I want to have an event where if this text box has been changed at all, then trigger some event. I'm going to double click on this right now to see what this does. So double click on this event, or this button, sorry, or not button, this text box, and it creates this event automatically for me, txt degree text changed. So if I go ahead and go back to my to my canvas, click on this button right, or click on this text box right there, look at my events, it has an event for text changed. It's going to run this function. So of course you could manually add this in, but Visual Studio is nice enough to sort of, if I double click on this, it knows the most common event for a text box would be a changed event. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and sort of work on some code with this. I'm going to go ahead and double click again to go back to my code. I'm actually going to go back over here for a second and sort of update this. So it's, yeah, like that. Let's go back to our code. So when this event is triggered, where we modify our text box, it will run this event. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just say lbl output.text equals blank. So now I'm going to go ahead and clear out that output button every time we type something over here. Let's go ahead and hit start and see what it does. Obviously it starts off blank because our form load happened. If I go ahead and type in 15.55 as my Celsius and I hit convert, it gives us the correct amount in Fahrenheit. So I'm going to go ahead and later on in the video modify this to give us a better, nicer looking output, but for now let's just keep it like this. Now I go ahead and I hit like backspace to remove something. It cleared out that label because we did update our text box, which is really nice. So if I go ahead and I just, just try, let's say 85.9, convert, there we are. If I go ahead and, if I added, let's say if I add like a 7 to the back of it, type 7, it also clears it out, which is really cool. So it's definitely a lot more nicer, more sophisticated than it was a second ago. So now we have that part down. So the next thing we're going to add to this is I'm going to go ahead and just say, well, what if, let's say the user enters some invalid. Let's say if I enter like something like, I put like W right there. I don't know. Obviously it's invalid, but I kind of want to make this not even clickable at all because, well, if it's invalid, then I don't want to be able to click convert. So let's go ahead and sort of do a little bit of work with this as well. So I guess this video does cover quite a bit of content, but really for the most part, a lot of this sort of events, you can sort of play around with the editor a little bit. You also can look up documentation online to find out all different events you can have for different objects on your in Visual Studio or with this WinForms, but I'm going to go over just most of the very basic stuff in these tutorials. So right now I'm going to do is the following. I'm going to go ahead and I guess I'll do a sort of a very simple approach to this. So I'm going to clear this, but I'm also going to now do the following. So I'm going to I don't really want to do a try parse, so I guess I want to look up right now the actual code for this. So I'm going to use a try parse just because, I guess why not. So I'm going to go ahead and create a variable double input, and I'm going to say if let me go ahead and copy all of this right there. So this is not really the best way of doing this, but I don't want to really look up documentation on this right now. So it's sometimes you forget some of the actual function calls you have in C#. I'll just keep it like this for now, just use input. So a try catch block would be better to use actually right here instead, but I'll just use this try parse instead because I don't feel like really doing all this. So I'm going to go ahead and just use a not. So if not double try parse, so if it says is invalid, then just have btn convert dot enable is set to false. So I'm going to disable this button if, let's say, it was not parsable. Else I'm going to say btn. Oh, that's nice. So it auto filled out for me. So if let's say it was able to parse it to a proper number, then I want to go ahead and I want to enable this button. So if it's an invalid input, disable it, otherwise enable it. So maybe a try catch would have been a better approach to this, but I just sort of didn't want to really look up the actual function. I mean, a try catch part is okay, but I forget the actual function. I think it's just you have to call. Anyway, just keep it simple like this for right now. So anyway, let's go ahead and test it out. So every time we're going to run our program, let's go ahead and sort of type in 56.4. It does work just correct. If I add, let's say, an 8, it works. Now, let's try to type in a letter F right here. And we see here, this button immediately disabled. It went gray because we updated our text and it's something that's not in a proper form. So it's not, we can't really do anything with this. So we can't convert this into an actual Celsius amount. And this text box change event disabled our button. If I go ahead and hit backspace, it's a proper number once again. Now it re-enabled our convert button. So pretty nifty how we can do that. So obviously for our WinForms programs, we're going to have a lot of different events we're going to have to sort of handle in our program. Now, of course, you can actually also create custom functions, and you can create global variables or class instance variables as well in your program. So for some of the bigger projects you're gonna have to work on, you may want to actually maybe add some extra custom functions in your program, like right around here somewhere, and then simply call them inside of these events if you want to do it along that way. So it's up to you how you want to do all of that. But anyway, that was sort of kind of another feature we can do as well. So now the next part is going to be to make the output look a little bit more decent, and also add one more button to this program, which is going to be maybe a button that will sort of end our program. So you also can click the box up there, but also we can also create a button that will close our program as well. And also I'm going to cover another important sort of feature of Visual Studio Code, which this is going to happen quite a bit in your program as you write your code, but let's get to that part towards the end. Let's first go over having nice output next. Okay, so here in our code, we're going to output our content to the user. So I went over an output method in earlier videos where I would use almost like a printf style in C, but here's another way of being able to print out variables nicely with other strings. So this is actually, I believe, also used in JavaScript as well. So I'm going to put a $ right there, and then I'm going to put this in our string in quotes like this. I'm going to go ahead and put in a bracket around all of this. So it's also using JavaScript as well, where a bracket around is going to tell us to output some type of variable contents and not an actual string literal. So I'm going to go ahead and say like degrees in Fahrenheit, put a space. I guess I'll put an F next to it right there. Now maybe I'll put maybe an equal sign as well. So this output right here, it outputs the literal string, degrees in Fahrenheit equals like this. Then it outputs the contents of our variable, and then the letter F like that. So it's a way to kind of switch back and forth between string literals and variable content. So this also can be used with console outputs from your earlier videos. I just sort of discovered this recently in C#, but you have to have a $ like that in front, or else it's not going to work. If I go ahead and remove this, it'll output the literally degrees in Fahrenheit output is literally. If I put a $ right there, it understands that this bracket really means output some contents of variables. So a nice way of being able to display output in a very nice, elegant manner, very similar to JavaScript. Let's go ahead and now run this. So I'm going to hit start once again. Now I'll type, once again, let's go with 100 just to be safe. And yeah, it looks like it's, looks nice. So it gives us a better output. If I go ahead and I type this, it clears that out. Cool. So 5.23 Celsius. So yeah, it does seem to be working nicely. Now, of course, you can format your decimals to output only 2 decimal places, but it's not really super important really here for EGG202. You want to mostly focus in this lab just understanding the fundamentals of this UI design and event-driven programming. But Of course, you could format the strings to output them in two decimal places like that. So you can format this string right there, but let's not really worry about that just right now. So anyway, we have this portion done. So now we can go ahead, I'll add one more button into this program to simply be able to end, or be able to act as a quit button to our to our app here. Alright, so let's go ahead and add our next button to this program. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my toolbox again, search for a button, and drag it right over here. And I'm going to go ahead and try to make it the same width as the convert button above. I'm going to actually use the convert button also to help us determine the height of this button. So okay, I think it matches perfectly. Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and put this back to the way it was. I used the convert button to help us. That way they're the same size. It looks better. So I'm going to go ahead and name this button. I'm going to call this maybe just quit. And I'm going to then, for the name of the button, I want to give it a proper name, just because it's always good to give a proper name, especially if you're going to be using those in your program codes. So let's see, where the heck is name? There it is. I'm going to call this maybe just btn quit. Okay. Now I'm going to double click on this to create the event. So when this button is clicked, it's going to call this function, and I'm going to say this dot close is sort of what you have to do. So you want to close this program down. So that's all this is going to do. Just hit start, and if I go ahead and I push this button down, quit, it ends the program. It calls that function and closes it down. So relatively straightforward. So now this is a very important part of the video right here, because this is going to happen to you possibly at times in your code. So let's say by accident you didn't want to have an event. Let's say I double click on this label just by accident. I double click and it creates the event. Darn. Okay, so when this label is clicked, it's going to call this event. Well, I don't want this because it's so dumb to have this method right there with no body to it. I'm not going to add anything to this. So okay, I'm going to go ahead and just say, you know what? I don't want this. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this. Okay, let's clear this out because I don't need this function. Okay, cool. Awesome. Now it's gone. Problem solved. Cool. What the heck just happened right there? Well, let's see. So what happens is the following. So I'm going to show you what you have to do in this situation. You want to click on this right here. So here's the problem. So in our program, it's going to add, see, all these buttons, all these objects we added to our form are actually all here in this file. So here's a button convert, JXT degree, and it adds all of these properties, all these fields to it. So it's not really using XML or XAML to set up our look. It's actually using all this. It's creating these codes and adding them into our content, into our content basically. So it's very similar to how Java GUI development looks like as well. So we have this event handler. We're adding this to our event handler, and we don't want this. I'm going to go ahead and sort of remove this because this function does not exist in my program anymore. So it says, well, there's an error right there. So if I remove this from this file and hit save, now everything is right back in our form. So that will fix the problem. But obviously, if you were to accidentally just double click on this label, well, you know what? Just keep it like that. As long as you don't add any function, any code to this, if I click on this label, nothing is going to happen. So just go ahead and sort of save this and run it. Look what happens. If I click on this label in my program, it doesn't do anything. It's not going to matter because it will trigger an event, but the event handler is going to do nothing at all. So it's not a problem. So I would just say, if you were to accidentally do that sometimes in your program, you accidentally double click on something, don't worry about it. Just leave it blank. We're not going to be so strict on actual, as long as your program works, we're not going to be too strict on sort of these sorts of things. But of course, you could erase that, but be very careful with that because then it's going to cause that issue to happen. So anyway, I just want to make sure I cover that right now because that will definitely happen in your as you're doing your labs, and I want to address this right now. Don't panic. You can sort of fix it by following that video, but of course, if you do it by accident, just don't mess with that function at all, and everything will be just fine. So anyway, those are very simple initial sort of program to do event handling. And I really think this video covers a lot of our future programs we're going to be doing for EGG202. A lot of our programs will mostly just be reading input from the user, having this button having this updating a text box, maybe clear out some stuff, having a convert button, having some button that performs some task. But of course, I'll go over more videos that goes over other sort of objects you can add to our form. But this really encapsulates a lot of our projects we're going to be doing in EGG202. So anyway, hopefully this video did sort of give you an idea of, or at least helps you see how cool it is to be able to design GUI apps using C#. So I guess take care for now, stay safe, and until next time.